The sales is about having a conversation, uncovering a need, and then meeting that need. Many times we think we know what other people need or want. If you're not getting the sales, if you're not getting that conversion, ask a few more questions before you go in with like, well, here's what I got for you. Let's keep asking those questions. Let's talk about how we're going to handle those objections when they come up, and so that you're more prepared. It's really important to understand your why. If you get stuck, it's time to skill up. If you're not sure how to be a leader, like listen to podcasts like this, right? Be a lifelong learner.
Welcome to the Leadership and Love podcast. We will cover leadership, mindset, personal development, and sales and marketing. You will experience thought-provoking conversations with both nationally and internationally recognized leaders. Our goal is to inspire you and deliver actionable items that you can implement that are going to help you accelerate your growth. Get ready to discover the magic and the power when you lead with love. Moyra Gorski is a wellness advocate, podcaster, and breast cancer survivor, and passionate entrepreneur dedicated to helping women live vibrant, healthy, and purposeful lives. She finds joy in ballroom dancing, by the way, very good at it, journaling, baking, and time with her family and dog Ruby. And actually, she just won an award, a trophy for ballroom dancing, so congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, that was an exciting week last week. It's always, as I told people, it was my first time competing in the rhythm, if you will. So cha-cha, rumba, swing, and I've ballroom danced for 5 years now, but usually just competed in smooth. And so I really didn't have a whole lot of expectations, except I was hoping that, I didn't forget anything, and then I had fun. And so when you win, when you get some awards or get a trophy or get a ribbon, that they think you're pretty good, it's just, icing on the cake. So it was a good time.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
So one of the things that you've done for quite a number of years at this point, I think it's Shaklee, right?
Right.
You're a Shaklee representative. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about and pick your brain on is around mindset and sales. So you've obviously done a bunch with sales. You lead and train sales teams and people under you. So I'd like you to start talking to us about sales. So when you're training your team, what's one of the most important things you think they need to know about sales?
Yeah, I've been involved in connected with Shaklee, partnered with them for 25 years. So I've not only built my own customer base, as well as, like you said, mentored many others. And it's sales is not easy. I must say that that's often what I say, but I also say it's a numbers game. And so one of the most important things that I tell people is that no doesn't mean never. And if you don't get all of those no's, you're never gonna get a yes. I mean, the more no's you get from people, the closer that you can get to a yes. I mean, somebody explained it to me in I'm sure a sales training that I went to, is that if we think about sales and conversations that we're having with people, because sales is about having a conversation, uncovering a need, and then meeting that need. And as you're speaking with people, think of it as a deck of cards, and so there's not all these, we have like 4 aces in the deck of cards. There's a few jokers and there's a few like low numbers and high numbers and things like that. But there's a few valuable cards in there, if you will, but not everyone is. And I look at that as sales and talk with my team about, like, everybody that you speak with isn't going to be a sale, or it's not going to be the most valuable sale. But if you keep flipping over the cards, if you keep talking with people, if you keep having conversations and reaching out, you're eventually going to get to those aces or those kings or those queens, those valuable customers. But not everybody's going to have the same value, but you have to keep going. And every once in a while, you're going to get a joker every once in a while, but you got to keep turning over the cards and keep having those conversations. I mean, there's a great book that's called Go for No, right? And I can't remember the gentleman's name that wrote it, but it's a short little book, but it's about going for the no's, because the more no's you have, the closer you are to getting that yes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's so truly true and so valuable. So for our listeners, one of the things that Moyra just said was that, again, sales is really just a numbers game. And I'd like to share one of my favorite words that doesn't start with an F or an S when you get a no, and that is next, right? Because at some point, and I like your no doesn't mean never. And if you get a no, it just means next. So what do you share and with your teams and those that you mentor and train on sales about how to keep track of their numbers and improve their, what I call their closing ratio, right? So if you get no's, what are you sharing with them to get better at getting more yeses?
For one, you have to have some type of tracking system. And today, some people like to use electronics, some people like to use paper. I'm still keeping paper. That's what's right here next to me is my tracker for my prospects and my client follow-up. But some people like to do it electronically. Regardless, there has to be some type of tracking so that you can follow up. But I think that what I've learned over the years and what I tell people is it's about asking the questions. Many times we think we know what other people need or want. And so then we make our suggestions, our recommendations, our presentation, if you will, based on what we think. And what if we're wrong? I mean, a lot of times we are. And the only way that we can be a little bit more sure about what that person perhaps might need and how we could fill that need is to ask them questions. So that's what I talk with them about. If you're not getting the if you're not getting the sales, if you're not getting that conversion, ask a few more questions before you go in with like, well, here's what I got for you. Let's keep asking those questions.
Yeah, so Moyra, you're hitting really the nail on the head here. And for everybody listening, one of the things that she's talking about is you don't just automatically drop into your sales presentation. You ask questions, because what she said at the beginning was very, very powerful. Your job is to figure out what their need is. And then if you have the solution to it, then you deliver that once you have the need. One of the things, I read this a while back in a book called How to Make a Hell of a Profit and Still Get to Heaven by Dr. John DeMartini. I love that book, but he paraphrased what you just said, and he said, selling isn't telling, selling's asking, right? And so I'd like you to talk about how you mentor people to ask the right questions to get to that need.
Well, I also tell people that like nobody likes to be should on.
For those of you that might misunderstood, she said SHOULD, that kind of should. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. So, nobody wants to hear like, hey, Louie, you should lose weight. Louie, you should be doing this. Louie, you should try to go out and make some more sales. I mean, nobody likes to be should on.
Right.
But people, and, people also like to be right. So sometimes it's, but in regards to that, I chuckle about that, but it's kind of like also if we can have a conversation with people and ask those questions and then ask those questions and what have you tried before and what's worked for you before, what hasn't worked before. Or one of my coaches said to me, what would have to be true in order for you to XYZ? And that's a really pretty challenging question, because I think a lot of times we don't ask that question. If you ask that to somebody, like, what would have to be true for you to make a decision to make this purchase today or get started with this plan or whatever that case is. But like, what would have to be true? Some people don't. I think that some people, when people give us that resistance to like, they don't want to buy from us or they don't want to, you know, they're giving resistance. And again, we could assume that, oh, it's because of this, this, and this, but sometimes we have to challenge them on and say, well, if what needs to be true to get that, or if I could do this for you, would you do this? It's just more questioning, but really very specific, very specific questioning. And I go back to the beginning of, so I'm a registered nurse. I worked in nursing for a little bit in my 20s, and then I moved myself into medical sales. And I remember talking with a physician one time because I would worked with different equipment and beds that were used in the hospital. And I remember going to a physician and sat down and just like basically vomited everything that I had inside of my head, without asking any questions. And at the end of my like, hey, well, what'd you think? He was like, well, and this was a long time ago, but basically, well, I don't really even deal with that kind of stuff that you just talked about. So I'm like, okay, so I just wasted my time as well as his time because I didn't ask those questions. But if I had asked some questions leading up to what I was going to present, perhaps I would have been a little bit more successful.
Right. And so what would your recommendation be for people that are listening on how to grow sales around keeping track of objections and finding answers for those objections?
This is what I did in my early sales careers too, is that I worked with my mentor, my coach or boss or whoever it was, and we practiced. She would say, okay, what if he says, well, it's not it's not in our dollars to do this year, and we practiced like all these objections. And so when I got those objections when I was in those sales calls, I was prepared because we had practiced. We had practiced closing, we had practiced dealing with those, we did that um, back and forth. And that helped me feel more comfortable with, okay, if this person brings up, well, I have to talk to my, husband. Like in my wellness business, I talk with a lot of women, and sometimes they'll say, well, I got to talk with my husband about before I spend this money, or I can't do this, whatever. I had practiced, how am I going to respond to those? And so I was
Yeah.
much more comfortable. And I do that with my team as well today. Just let's talk about how we're going to handle those objections when they come up. And so that you're more prepared.
So Moyra, you just for our listeners, she just touched on a couple of very, very powerful things. There is great reward in practicing, right? And because sales, like every other skill, is a learnable skill. And so it's not that hard at all to practice. And what Moyra just said is, even with people practice going through objections. And then she's keeping track of these objections and then the answer to those objections. And so if you get a brand new objection, then you want to figure out your answer, your solution to it, but then practice that, right? Very, very powerful. I'd like to talk about, and you and I, before we got on the call, we're talking about this. I'd like you to talk about the importance around mindset, and what do you share with your team members when they get a bunch of no's? You can go stretches with a bunch of no's that'll wear on your enthusiasm and your desire to keep going. What do you share with your team around mindset when they get a bunch of rejection?
Yeah, I think, it's really important to, before you get started with, what you're doing with your job, with your business, even with your hobby, like it's really important to understand your why. Because if you don't understand your why, when you have all those objections, when you have those bad days that everybody's saying no, nobody's answering the phone. If you have that why either right in front of you, or you can remember that why, well, I'm doing this for a long term, or I'm doing this so that I can be at home with my kids and not have to get a corporate job, or whatever your why is. It's so important to define that and really get clear about that, because we are going to have bad days and we're going to have really good days. But when we have those hard days, and I tell my team, like, when you have those hard days, just get back to your why, right? Of like, why are you doing this in the first place? And yes, there's going to be ups and downs, and every day is not going to be good. And just knowing what that why, I think, is super important.
So Moyra, you just hit it out of the ballpark. So I want you to understand what she's talking about. And there's a great book by Simon Sinek called Why. But you want to figure out, are you doing it for security for your family? Are you doing it because you want to take a vacation? Is this a side hustle? Whatever that might be, you want to know your why, because your why really gets you out of bed in the morning, right, Moyra? And that's gonna keep you going. Haven't you heard or seen people? You ever watch anybody out exercising, running in the rain? There's somebody with a really strong why, right? and let's go back to ballroom dancing for a minute. Hasn't there been times when your feet hurt, your back hurt, you were tired, it was a long day, and you thought, well, I could blow this off, but your why was bigger than the inconvenience or even the pain.
Right. Yeah. And that's actually something that's really helped with my, with my dance, is my mindset recently, is the fact that I choose this. I mean, this is a hobby of mine. It's a little bit of a pricey hobby, but it's a hobby that I choose because I have so much fun with it. And so on those bad days, which there are plenty, and I know we talked about that going up to my competition, there was some uncomfortableness. There was like just a lot of work and a lot of like not doing it well. But I knew that this is something that I love to do. And so I just keep, and I often say to Norbert, I know I choose to be here and I'm just really loving it. But in the end of the day, I do. Otherwise, I wouldn't show up there 2 or 3 times a week, because like you said, my why is pretty strong, because I want to do something that just takes my mind off of this crazy world we live in. And that's exactly what dance does for me. And it also gives me the confidence. And I will tell another story about like that whole uncomfortableness and getting out of your comfort zone. I mean, that's really what I did this last week. Was, like I said, I competed in a style that I hadn't competed in before. And so we kept talking about, yes, this is uncomfortable. This is uncomfortable, as I was doing my lessons and things like that. But I'll tell my team this too, like with sales, with whatever you're doing, when you get uncomfortable and you stretch yourself and do those uncomfortable things, the healing, the victory, the it's just right. Once you get through that confidence or get through that uncomfortable, there is so much more confidence and the healing and the success and things like that. Because I have to tell you, again, I had a great day last week competing, and I came into my lesson on Tuesday and I had this like new confidence, because of course we had to do rhythm again and we had to review the things that I had done wrong. But I could feel that, greater sense of confidence. But I had done the uncomfortable thing and I was continuing, if that makes any sense. I had found my success, more confidence, as I stretched myself past that uncomfortable. Again, when we're in sales, when we're trying to get that sales, we're trying to reach our goal, it can be uncomfortable. But finding these new ways of doing things, and I'll even tell my team, if you get stuck, it's time to skill up, right? So if you get stuck, you're just not getting the goals, you're not getting the sales, maybe it's time to learn some new skills. Again, maybe it's that practicing of the objections, but it's maybe some other skills that you need to learn.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And so she hit a bunch of things that I want to make sure you listeners are catching. First one is, you notice she's got why for everything she's doing in her life. And I share with people, life isn't hard. Everybody pushes back. Yes, it is. You don't know trust me. We've all had a hard life. I don't care who you are, right? But life's not hard in terms of, if you're on course, your heart's happy. If you're off course, you're unhappy. And so what Moyra's talking about here is, make sure you know your why. If sales isn't your bread and butter and doesn't make your heart go pitter patter, and your why's not big enough to learn new skills, to be able to deal with rejection and those kinds of things, then go do something else. It's not hard, right? But continuing to try and be, if you're 5 feet tall, your odds of playing in the NBA aren't that good. Right? It might be time to go do something else. And the other thing that she was talking about is, again, and this is so very, very powerful. Sales is a learnable skill, and the more uncomfortable you are, the sooner it's going to get easier and better. The more uncomfortable you are, the sooner it's going to get easier and better. And again, I love what you're talking about, Moyra, because that's where the growth is at, right? I'd also like to share something with everybody. And I learned this from Jack Canfield, and it's rejection. So if I was to ask Moyra right now, Moyra, will you give me $10,000? And Moyra says no, I could take it personally, and I could think, well, Moyra doesn't like bald guys, or Moyra doesn't like guys with glasses, or Moyra doesn't like somebody that leads a podcast, blah, 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 blah. But maybe Moira just doesn't have $10,000 and it has nothing to do with me. When somebody gives you a no, it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them. And so, and if I asked Moira to give me $10,000, would my life get worse? No. I know how to live my life without the $10,000. You know, it's like if you apply to Harvard and they say no and reject you, do you know how to live your life without going to Harvard? Yeah. So your life didn't change at all. If you ask somebody for the sale and they say no, did your life change? No, it stayed exactly the same. Things didn't get worse, didn't get better. It just stayed exactly the same. Very powerful. Yeah, very powerful. So what's one of the things that you like to do when your teams or yourself, because I think this is very important. What do you share with people on how to celebrate? Like, so when they have a sales victory or they have a bunch of them in a row, how do you help them to celebrate that victory so that their brain starts to like that habit?
Yeah, it's really important, because I say this because I've learned this too, but people often don't celebrate. Again, we are just grinding through. We're just grinding through and getting to the next thing, or getting to the next month or whatever. There's a couple of things. You can look at it on a monthly basis. Now, I work in a business that we do things on a monthly basis. So as we close up the month and we start the new one, I often encourage my team to, like, before you get barreling into the new month, take a look at what happened last month and, like, write down, you know, the things that you can celebrate, and write down your challenges. But first of all, let's look at the things that we can celebrate. You know, you got this goal, you got this incentive, or you brought on a new, business partner, or you helped 5 people with their health solutions, or things like that. But let's look at the things and let's celebrate them, instead of just going into the next month and going into the next month. And then what a really powerful exercise that I do on a yearly basis, that I encourage my team to do, and sometimes we do it together, is to celebrate your year. So do that on like at the end of the year, the beginning of the year, but look at your whole year and go through every month and look at the good, the good things that happened and your challenges, good things and challenges. Because I got to the end of a year when I was working with one particular coach, and I wasn't getting the incentive trip. I love to work for things. And so we had an incentive trip, and I was coming, this close, and I didn't get it. And so, of course, I was down on myself, and woe is me, and this really sucks, and all that. And she said, why don't you go ahead and do this exercise? Because she knew that as I worked with her and I started to work with her, I talked about my goals and my plans and things like that. And she said, I think you've accomplished a lot this year, but I also think that there's things that, happened that you need to recognize too. And so it was such a powerful experience, because again, in January, am I thinking about what happened in March? No. But guess what? That year, what happened in March is my mother died. And so she had been ill, and so there were several weeks of, her being ill, and then she passed. But I also created a journal, and I also published a journal in that summer. And then I was having trouble with one of my sons was having trouble. And we ended up encouraging him to move out of the house. So there were some really good things. And I had, again, continued on with my business, but I wasn't as consistent in years past. Well, consistency, I've learned, leads to earning those trips or earning the incentives. But I wasn't as consistent because I had some kind of major life things, happening. And so I encourage my team to look at that, while I look at that myself, to say, okay, let's celebrate the wins. Make sure you're taking time to celebrate that. Even if it's you going to buy yourself flowers at Trader Joe's when you go shopping because you just had a really good month, or you closed that difficult customer. You have to make sure that we celebrate, because that, again, reminds us that, like, wow, this is fun. We're doing a great job. But also being aware that there are things that come in our way that will throw us off course. Maybe it's an illness. Maybe it's an illness of your loved one or something like that. But being aware of that makes us realize that, oh, maybe that's why the month wasn't so good, or the year wasn't as good as I would have expected. And that's just life.
That's so powerful, and such a great practice. And so again, for everybody listening, it's what Moyra shared was the ability to look at a big picture, right? Sometimes, it's the old saying, you can't see the forest for the trees. So Moyra hit a couple of golden nuggets there. One of them is the power of working with a coach or a consultant, whatever that would sound like. And because they can see the forest and the trees. What would you suggest to our listeners for them to help them with the grace and forgiveness for themselves? Because we often are hardest, actually, we are actually harder on ourselves than anybody else is. So what would your thoughts and coaching be around that?
I'm a big proponent of journaling. Journaling is, again, writing down your thoughts. It can be as simple as opening up a blank notebook and writing some thoughts down, to having a pretty notebook and you follow all these journal prompts and things like that. But really, this is again something that I've learned from a coach and a mentor is that when I sit down and journal in the morning, oftentimes I'll write down my things that I'm grateful for. And again, that can be as simple as the sunshine or the dog sitting next to me or my strong body or my vibrant business and things like that. But she also taught us to put a grace thing there. So who should you give grace to? Sometimes it's to ourselves, right? To say that, yesterday wasn't a good day, or, give grace to your husband who wasn't having a good day, or things like that. But just, again, being grateful every day and knowing that the person that you should be grateful for is yourself, and just showing yourself that love. And again, oftentimes I'll give people, if it is one of my teammates, is think about journaling this way. Think about, why am I feeling resistance around growing? Why am I not, that give yourself some things to think about and write about it. Journaling is kind of like free therapy, and it's just a way to kind of get those ideas out of your head. And sometimes you don't know what you're going to say. I mean, sometimes you don't know what you're going to write. Sometimes you don't know what you're going to say. But there's a lot of wisdom that comes as you start to.
Moyra's got a big smile on her face for those of you that are listening and not watching. And she keeps hitting on these powerful, powerful points. And I can tell you that I journal in the morning, I journal in the evening. But one of the things that Moyra just touched on, hugely powerful, and that is that this wisdom comes out of you. And that's the power of journaling, because at some point you'll drop into a space where it just flows from you, right? And this great wisdom for solutions, for grace, for self-love, all will come pouring out of you because you've taken the time to write it down. I also would like to share with you, Moyra, and the listeners, is I journal in the evening, and one of the things I ask is, what happened today that made today great? And then I ask two other questions. What did I do today for myself? And what did I do to help serve or heal somebody else?
Yeah. And I want to tell people that, when I first started journaling and people were recommending it, I'm like, have you seen my penmanship? I mean, I can hardly read my own writing. But sometimes, I mean, I always say that I learned that, I'm not necessarily going to write a book with my journals. Maybe every once in a while I go in there and I find some nuggets. Like when I was diagnosed with breast cancer and I went away for a couple of days by myself. I mean, I took a journal and there was a lot of writing in there. And so I have gone back and reflected on that. But regardless of that, it's not about how beautiful the penmanship is and the writing and stuff like that. It's really about, like you said, just start writing. And it's amazing the wisdom that comes out. And sometimes I'll tell people, just put a timer on for 10 minutes and just write until the timer goes off, and don't stop. And it's amazing what will come out of you.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. And I also like the idea, I share with people, I believe everybody's got two books in them. One book is your life story. The other book is whatever you've been doing for a living, to generate revenue. You're an expert on both those things, and somebody can take advantage of your story, your lessons, and the things that you've learned along the way. I really love this journaling piece. I'd like you to talk about in the overall picture, how do you help the people that you mentor in the sales specifically to keep their focus on the long term and whatever their goal is?
Well, when people set a goal, again, sometimes they set it for the month, but a lot of times they set it for a year, at least for the business that I'm in, because we do kind of have a yearly cycle where you can, earn rewards, incentives, and things like that. Um, so I encourage them to set the goals. I mean, don't be afraid to set the goals, but then what do they say? Engineer it back or whatever. Let's look at what you need to do on the, daily basis, on the monthly basis, so that you can accomplish that. That's what I learned in that exercise of looking at the year, because I found that there were some gaps in my consistency. Now, just for myself, I've been very consistent this year with, helping new people with their health and bringing on new teammates and things like that. I'm this close to earning the trip, and it's not even the end of the year, but it's because I've stayed consistent. So it's really important when I work with my teammates to say, okay, what are you going to do this month? What are you going to do next month? And it's like rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. You want to just keep doing that. But I also feel like a coach, like you said it earlier, Louie, like a coach and a mentor, whatever they want to call me, um, they can give you this different perspective. We get so like, okay, this is the only, it's like, well, how about you think about it this way? And again, I've been in the industry for 25 years in direct selling. I have a lot of perspective on what works and what doesn't work. And I've also learned as a leader, the most important thing that I can do is get to know the people that I'm leading and get to know what their goals are, what their desires are, get to know their personality style, what kind of interests them, what turns them on, what motivates them, what their values are. Because I've learned and made many mistakes, that if I want them to like do things like I do it, it's not going to happen. I need to, I mean, there's going to be every once in a while some people that are kind of like me that might operate like me, but it's better for me to get to know Christine, Julie, Nancy, get to know them and what their goals are, and then work with them with that. Because I know that as I help them accomplish their goals and their dreams, then I'm going to get my goals too. But I've got to get to know. I mean, I've led so long time ago. I led from like, hey, let's do everything like me. I have this, I'm a certain way. I'm an Enneagram 4. I look at things like very globally. I like to do things very uniquely. Not everybody's like me, but also not everybody's like Kristen or Susie or Nancy and all those other people. But it's best for me to get to know them and what their goals are and help them create strategies around getting their goals and come along right beside them, instead of just saying, hey, this is, being this is the way everybody's got to do things.
So one of the things, my goodness, thank you so much, Moyra. So what she just touched on, everybody, is her leadership skill and her ability to lead people from a place of understanding who they are and what motivates them. She used the word values, one of my favorite words. You have to know their values, what's important to them, what is important in their life. It could be their family, whatever that is. And then she also said something else that was just genius, and that is that her skills and her gifts are not going to work, and her process for how she sells isn't going to work for everybody else. But by taking the time to learn those people's skills and talents and values, she can now mentor them, coach them, whatever those words are for you, to have success. And then she hit the flipping nail on the head again, and she knocked it out of the park. And she said, because when they succeed, I succeed. And I don't think there's anything truer than that. When you help other people succeed, they're going to help you succeed. That's very, very wise, Moyra.
But I will tell you that, like, again, as a leader, I think it's important for people to hear that it's really important to go and learn about different personality traits or styles or whatever. Again, I'm a big fan of the Enneagram, but there was one program that I learned about that had, I don't know, people were different colors, but those colors were certain things, or, you know, or different, just again, different ways that people are kind of categorized, or personality or whatever. Because again, if you are somebody, Louie, that loves numbers, and I come to you and say, hey, you know what, if you're looking to make, $50,000 this year, then we've got to have you doing this, and, getting 1,000 here and then whatever. I have to give you very specifics. But if I say, hey, well, we're going to do something about this, and maybe it'd be about the, I mean, you've got to have, and I bet you're going to want something like in a spreadsheet type of thing. But there's other people that don't operate like that, myself included. If you kind of tell me the global plan, I'm really good for it. And if it feels good to me, I'm good with it. But everybody's different. So if I come to you and talk to you like I'm talking to myself, it's not going to work, right?
Right, without a doubt. And so again, she's touched on a couple of very powerful things, and there are different personality types. I reached out behind me because I've got this. It's from a company called Insights. It's the four. Well, let me get this. It's the four colors you were talking about: red, yellow, green, and blue. And red is be brief, be bright, be gone. Yellow is involve me. Green is show me you care, and blue is give me the details. I'm a be brief, be bright, and be gone, right? I just tell me yes or no. This is, and so it's but how you deal with people, that it all depends on where they live in the world, right? How they see the world, how they operate. And I love
and
the
you
number.
you can ask people that as you're, again, working to get to know them, and before you go in and close them, right, with a proposition or a plan or whatever, you can ask, and that's for a podcast for another day. I mean, you can ask questions like, even just as you're sitting down and talking with them, again, people have form like family, occupation, whatever, but you're asking them different questions, getting to that, like, and you hear them, you let them talk. So you're like, oh, this is really important to them. They went to church today, and they, whatever, their family or their goals or it's, as you have conversations, you can hear how that person is, or who that person is. And then again, you can make your, as you're trying to close the sale, if you will, you can make those conversations so that they'll speak to them because you've gotten to know who they are.
Right, right. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
One thing that popped up as I was thinking about that and preparing for this, as as somebody that, again, I started out building my business from nothing. I was a nurse, medical sales, and then all of a sudden I happened upon wellness, and again, decided to partner myself with Shackley and, have a business. And I didn't really know how to have a business. I knew how to help people, and I knew I had a heart and a desire to help people, and I still do today. But one person that, again, I've learned this along the way, as I have worked to become a leader. Again, it's been important I've mentioned books and things like that. It's so important to read, to learn, so that you can, again, if you don't know how to be a leader, then read books on people who become leaders. And I know that you and I have been in circles and things like that. We've done things like this. Like, I've also learned to act like the leader that I want to be. I may not know what I'm doing, but I want to be consistent. I want to be successful. I want to be a mentor. I want to be a kind, loving leader. So what I did is I acted that way, even before I really knew what I was doing. But I also knew, as a leader, I want others to hear that, again, if you're not sure how to be a leader, like, listen to podcasts like this, right? Be a lifelong learner. And I continue to be that way. I mean, and if you read John Maxwell, I believe he's the one that, like, when he wanted to improve himself as a speaker and as a leader out there in the world, like, he went and he made appointments with people, and traveled to people's homes, people that he admired in the leadership world. And he asked if he could ask him a few questions. And so that's how he learned a lot, from people that he admired. And so, I don't know, I encourage people to do that too. If you're saying, I don't know if I can be a leader, or I'm not sure if I have the gift for that, well, learn from others who have gone before you, and just commit yourself to being really a lifelong learner.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I believe that, like, and I said this on a podcast a while back, whether it's sales, leading, everything's a learnable skill, right? Both you and I, when we started, we weren't great at sales, we weren't great at leadership, but excuse me, because of that consistency of wanting to learn, we get to that point where we just because you're either, and you and I both, and we've talked about this before, we're either growing and getting better, or we're shrinking and getting worse. Nothing in the universe stays the same or stands still. Nothing. Everything's changing. The question is, which way are you going? Are you getting better or are you getting worse?
Right. But I also want, in that regard too, I want people, because I told a teammate this recently, like they're also, and I think I talked about this in the beginning, like there are rhythms of life, and there are times that you go through rough patches, or again, your mother gets sick, or there's something's going on, and it's okay to take the time to be there, to focus there. Like, my dad passed in December. I know we've talked about that. Like, I had 2 weeks of just being with him, and I'll never regret that time that I took away from my business. I kind of put my business aside. I mean, I'd broken my foot, so I had to put dance aside. So, but I was focusing on that time. And I told a teammate that the other day, who was feeling like, oh, I just, like, you're in a time of life where you have 3 kids, and you're doing, I mean, you've got all these things and these challenges. Okay, that's okay. That's the seasons you're in. So don't put all this pressure on you to, like, maybe you're not going to get the incentive trip this year. Maybe you're not going to, because your focus should be on your family. And again, back to your why. That's why you chose to have this business that you could build while you were a stay-at-home mom. So it got back to
Right.
that. But so it's, we have these ebbs and flows of life, and we need to realize that, and keep that in mind.
Yeah, very, very powerful. What would you say? It's one of my favorite questions before we end the podcast. What's one of your favorite books and why?
Well, there's 2 of them that pop up when somebody asked me that question. And there was one that I read quite a while back called "You Are a Badass," and it's by Jen Sincero, something like that. You can look it up and you'll find it. But it was kind of during, a friend of mine, a colleague, recommended it to me, kind of in the midst of when our daughter was struggling with some really severe mental health challenges. And I just was feeling really just heavy and low, and just, she gave me that book to read, and I read it in a weekend, and it just reminded me about myself, that I am a badass, and that it's okay. Again, we have challenges and things like that, but it really reminded me about who I was. And it kind of started this campaign, this was several years ago, of like taking Moyra back, because she's like, I don't see you anymore. I don't see you. You're getting lost in the stress and the struggle of life.
Yeah.
And so it helped me with that. And then a more recent one that I have listened to, because I love to listen to personal development books, is called The Let Them Theory. And that's by Mel
Oh, yeah,
Robbins.
by Mel Robbins. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love Mel Robbins. I mean, she's somebody that I have listened to and read for many years. And the Let Them Theory is to, like, just not be so bothered by what everybody else says, and not to be like, oh, let them, and just be so passive, but let them talk about me, let them have success. I mean, in this industry that I'm in right now, there's a lot of fluctuation. We've had a real influx of people that have come from other companies, and they've gone to the highest rank so quickly, and there's been all this chatter over here like, well, look at them, and they're getting all this attention. I'm like, well, let them get the attention, right? But then what are you going to do? And then, so it's like, let them, but then let me. And so just disregard, put your blinders on, don't pay attention to them. It doesn't matter what they think or what they say, but you take care of you and what you want to do. And this was such a great book.
And I love that. For our listeners, I want you to really grasp what she just shared, and that is that your success, or how your worth, or all those things, your self-confidence, are not tied or connected to anybody else's success or failure. Your job is to get better a little, even if it's a little bit, every day. Your job is to make you a better you, and not worry about what the rest of the world is doing. So powerful. So, Moyra, I want to share a couple things. One is I was lucky enough to be a guest on your podcast. So where can people find your podcast?
So it is now called Your Journey to Joy podcast. It's on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, all the major. And I'll certainly give you a link. It used to, I think when I interviewed you, it was called Juggling the Chaos of Recovery. So I have lots of interviews with awesome people like you that have overcome challenges in their life. And although I still talk about that, I really focus on joy because I know that when we go through our challenges, when I went through my challenges, I was kind of waiting for things to get better. And I realized that, you know what, it was up to me to go find the good, find the things that bring me joy. So I really focus on that. So you could probably put both of those in there, but again, you'll have the link so that people can find Your Journey to Joy. Lots of interviews, but I've got some solo times that I come on and chat as well.
Yeah. And so for our listeners, we'll put all that in the meeting notes as well. And then, Moyra, how can people reach out to you if they would like to connect and learn more about both Shaklee, your wellness, and those kinds of things?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on all the social media as well. I'm very active on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook with, again, my name. And we didn't really talk about this, but really such a focus. And again, I say this, if there's women listening to this, but as well as if there's a man on here who has a woman that he loves that perhaps might be going through menopause, that's really been a focus of mine the last several months. And I've created a Joyful M Circle where I support the women going through menopause. I know this is off the side of leadership, but
that's okay.
have, but again, so many women, I've taken that. So many women have come up to me, sometimes even men, and said, I don't know what's going on. And so I have a lot of knowledge around that. And so that's why I created this safe, supportive community where I'm bringing in some guest experts. I'm sharing the knowledge that I have about nutrition and mindset and all those things around how we can get through this transition, how women can get through this transition of life in a little bit more joyful fashion. And so I do have something, if you're wondering, is this menopause? I do have a little thing that I can put in the show notes. It says, is this menopause? And it's just an interesting kind of questionnaire you can go through to say, because there's so many symptoms. Somebody said there were 34 symptoms that are related to menopause. Somebody said there's 100. People are very confused. And so I really want to shed light on that and really want to support that. So if people are interested in that type of support, certainly that's a free tool that you can, because it's a nice, again, questionnaire, but then there's some good content in there. Again, what do you do?
Awesome. All right, yeah. Moyra, you're one of my favorite people, so thank you very much for taking the time. Yeah. And this was a powerful conversation. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again for joining us and listening to this episode of Leadership and Love. I would like to challenge you to ask yourself, what's one thing that you heard today that you can implement immediately to improve your leadership and accelerate your growth? If you've gotten value out of this episode or learned something that you can implement today, we'd ask that you please share it with those that you care about. Our goal is to create more leaders who are leading with love.